New at 10, a Missouri City family is pleading for justice for Jamaica Williams. The mother of four was killed Friday night in front of her children.
On the evening of November 10, 2023, a 38-year-old woman was preparing for a date when her husband barged into her house and did the unthinkable. Moments later, Jatera Williams received the harrowing call from her niece. What her niece said next would leave an entire community devastated. As she picked up the call, her niece said, "Daddy just killed my mommy."
I had got a call from my niece, and my niece was just crying, and she was like, "My daddy just killed my mama."
She immediately rushed to her sister's home in Bird Run Drive, southwest Houston, Texas. And what she found was Jamaica Williams shot in the face. And worst of all, her children were there to witness everything. But the horrors did not end there. As the police got involved, they were then met with a series of shocking discoveries that would change everything.
Gunned down in front of her own children. Police say she was shot by her on and off again boyfriend, who was also the father of two of her kids.
This is the life and death of Jamaica Williams. This story takes us deep into the heart of Texas, a state vast in size and influence. As the second largest in the nation, Texas is home to major metropolitan hubs like Houston, Dallas, and Austin, and plays a key role in shaping the country's cultural and economic landscape. It's also a major center for oil and gas production, fueling both industry and the economy. However, when it comes to public safety, Texas has long grappled with elevated crime levels. Violent offenses and property crimes remain a concern, especially in its densely populated cities. While crime trends differ from one region to another, urban centers often bear the brunt of these challenges. And this challenge would reflect on the gruesome tragedy that fell on Jamaica Williams. Jamaica Williams, affectionately known as New to those closest to her, was born on December 10, 1984 in Houston, Texas. She was the beloved daughter of Jimmy and Angela Steptoe Williams, who raised her with a deep sense of love and stability. Alongside her siblings, Tasha and Anthony, Jamaica grew up in a nurturing environment that helped shape her into the strong, responsible woman she would become. Her bond with her family, especially her siblings, remained tight throughout her life. Jamaica graduated from Alfonso Crutch High School. Afterward, she enrolled at Texas Southern University, where she pursued a degree in education. Known for her vibrant spirit and genuine kindness, Jamaica carried those same qualities into every part of her life, both in her personal relationships and her career. She eventually took on the role of quality assurance manager at Cigna Healthcare, where she brought the same level of dedication and care she showed her loved ones. As she stepped into her adult years, Jamaica met a man who would eventually take everything from her. This man was a 40-year-old named Christopher Lee Levels. At first glance, Christopher seemed like a decent man, and their connection seemed to offer the promise of a stable future and a shared life together. This relationship eventually led them to have 4 children together: Jaden, Amiria, Cambria, and Kaylee. Jamaica's children were the heart of her world. As a mother, she poured her energy into creating a nurturing and loving home, making sure her kids were safe, supported, and surrounded by care. No matter what was happening in her personal life, her priority never wavered. Everything she did was for them. Her siblings, Tasha and Anthony, shared in that dedication, often stepping in to lend support and keep the family grounded during difficult times. But while Jamaica remained focused on her children's well-being, her relationship with Christopher Lee Levels grew more strained over time. The two had a long and unstable history, marked by frequent arguments, breakups, and reconciliations. His behavior became increasingly volatile, driven by jealousy and control, and he often directed harsh words and emotional pressure toward Jamaica. Tasha and Anthony became more concerned as his outbursts escalated, especially when he started borrowing money from them and refusing to repay it, adding tension not just with Jamaica, but with her entire family. Among the most alarming patterns were the repeated threats Christopher made. He would often lash out in anger, saying things that hinted at violence or worse.
This could happen.
I knew this guy wasn't right, and I knew he didn't belong with my sister. It just, I hate that this had to happen or whatever, but I've been seeing snakish ways in this guy's, like times where I didn't came to my sister's house before, And this guy walk in the house with only food for himself, no food for the kids, no food for my sister. And right then and now, I knew how selfish he was, because how can you come home without food for your family and you the man of the house? You only come home with food for yourself. And right then and now, I knew he wasn't right for my sister.
Although he had never physically harmed her, his words were unsettling. Still, Jamaica and her family chose not to report these threats. They saw them as impulsive remarks made in the heat of the moment. Hurtful, yes, but not something they believed he would act on. It was a decision made out of hope, maybe even denial, but it would soon prove to be a mistake with devastating consequences. On the evening of November 10, 2023, Christopher's abuse reached its climax. That evening, Jamaica Williams was at her home in Missouri City, Texas, preparing to head out for the night with some friends. This outing wasn't just a casual get-together. It was part of her effort to leave behind the turmoil caused by Christopher Lee Levels and explore a healthier connection with someone who truly shared her values and aspiration. Standing in front of her mirror, she carefully straightened her hair, feeling genuinely excited about the night ahead. The moment was filled with optimism, but that energy shifted the instant Christopher unexpectedly showed up at her home. Levels had long been known for his controlling nature and jealous tendencies, and that night followed a familiar, unsettling pattern. Watching Jamaica smile and prepare to spend time with someone new seemed to trigger something in him. Unable to handle the idea of her moving on and finding happiness elsewhere, he confronted her in anger. Then, with chilling finality, he told her, "You're not going anywhere. Today is the day."
Adrian, what was your experience with him?
My experience was totally different. Like, I actually was around him like more than everybody else, so I'm hurt. Like, I'm a different type of hurt. I had just talked to him the night before, like, and I really don't even have the words to say. Like, he hurt my whole family. He hurt our whole neighborhood, like everybody. These kids are traumatized. Like,
Right.
I'm just hurt.
That statement would mark a terrifying and irreversible turning point in what began as a hopeful evening. In a sudden act of unimaginable violence, Christopher Lee Levels pulled out a firearm and shot Jamaica in the face. The sound of the gunfire rang out through the house, breaking the stillness of the night. At the time of the shooting, 3 of their children, ages 14, 12, and 7, were inside the home and witnessed the horrifying event firsthand. The scene left them frozen with fear, unable to fully grasp what had just happened to their mother. After firing the shot, Levels looked back at Jamaica, seemingly stunned by his own actions. He reportedly said, "What did I just do? I actually shot her," as if trying to make sense of the irreversible harm he had just caused.
He just shot her, and then the kid said that he looked back and said, "I can't believe I shot her," and then he just ran out the house and fled in my sister's car.
Without offering help or calling for assistance, he fled the house, driving away in Jamaica's vehicle and leaving behind a trail of devastation. In the middle of the chaos, one of the children, barely able to speak through their tears, managed to call Jamaica's sister. With a trembling voice, the child cried, "My daddy just killed my mama." The call sent Jamaica's sister into a panic. She rushed to the house, praying that somehow what she heard wasn't true. But when she arrived, her worst fears were confirmed. First responders were already on the scene, having been alerted by another call. Despite their best efforts to save her, Jamaica had died from her injuries. She was pronounced dead at the scene. For the children, that night left a permanent emotional wound. The oldest, just 14 years old, stood in shock, unable to process what had just happened. The trauma of witnessing such a violent act would remain with them, affecting their lives in ways that words could hardly describe. But the terror that unfolded that night didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building quietly, dangerously, for months. For those who knew Jamaica, it was a moment they had feared but still hoped would never come.
Definitely a surprise. However, he have been making threats lately, but we never thought like, okay, he meant that.
The threats had been there, the warning signs were real, but no one thought Christopher Lee Levels would go that far. The pain he caused wasn't just the loss of a life, it was the destruction of a family, a wound that could never fully heal. And when police arrived at the scene, they were met with something that would haunt even the most seasoned officers. Jamaica's home, once filled with the sounds of her children and the rhythm of everyday life, had become a crime scene. Her children were still there, clinging to each other, trying to understand what had just happened. And as the reality sank in, a more urgent question took hold. Where was the man who did this?
We took him in for 20 plus years. He never brought nothing to the table, only took away. He probably still owes us money to this day, but it's not about the money. It's about the children and about what he did. And I just wish he could be man enough to just accept the consequences that he caused. Like, turn himself in, that'll be the best thing to do. But he never grew up. He's never been a grown man, so.
Christopher Lee Levels had fled. He was gone by the time police arrived, and the urgency to find him took over. Investigators quickly gathered witness statements and reviewed surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses. But it wasn't just police doing the work.
We feel like he's armed and dangerous. We don't know what he'll do to us. He knows where all of us live and things like that. We feel like he don't have anything to lose.
Jamaica's loved ones and an outraged community helped tip the scales. Public outrage also played a role. As news of Jamaica's death spread, so did the calls for justice. The community rallied around her family, refusing to let her death become another forgotten tragedy. Her sister, Jatera, spoke out immediately, warning others about the signs of domestic violence and pleading with the public for help in locating Levels. On social media, her posts were shared thousands of times, accompanied by photos of Jamaica and her children and a growing chorus of voices demanding action. The message was loud and clear. Christopher Levels wouldn't stay hidden for long. The pressure worked. As authorities closed in, it became clear that the walls were tightening, but an unexpected turn of events would happen.
Police have yet to publicly ID a suspect, but the family says a domestic dispute with Jamaica's ex-boyfriend turned deadly while she was flat ironing her hair.
On November 16, 2023, 6 days after the shooting, Christopher Lee Levels voluntarily appeared at a Houston police station, ending a nearly week-long search after the deadly shooting of Jamaica Williams. His decision to turn himself in may have stemmed from a sense of remorse, combined with the awareness that authorities were actively pursuing him. He was immediately taken into custody and charged with murder. His arrest marked a key development in the unfolding investigation and the legal process that followed the heartbreaking incident. Because witnesses had come forward and surveillance footage had already linked him to the crime, authorities were able to move quickly in formally detaining his detention. But even as he was booked and processed, a haunting detail would soon emerge, one that made the loss feel even more cruel. Witnesses later told investigators that shortly after the shooting, Levels had appeared shaken, repeatedly stating that he couldn't believe he did that. Those words, however hollow, were just another layer of heartbreak for Jamaica's family. They didn't need his disbelief. They needed her back. And in the courtroom, the full weight of what he'd done finally came into view. During the hearings, prosecutors laid out their case in painstaking detail. Jamaica had endured repeated threats. Her children had been exposed to the volatility of a man who couldn't handle rejection.
Do you guys know what may have triggered this?
I would say what triggered it is they were not together. She only let him come around so much because the children, they love their dad so much, so they always wanted him around. My sister felt sorry for him, so she would let him come spend nights and things like that. She told him that he had until Sunday, which was the 12th, to stop just popping up and, you know, spending the night and things like that. She was in the mirror flat ironing her hair. She was going to hang out with a guy friend. And he was just so jealous where he couldn't stand it. And first he took her car keys and was like, "You're not going nowhere," you know. And she was like, "Give me my keys, give me my keys." Or my nieces are telling me the story because they were sitting there when he did it.
Right.
And she was asking for her keys, so she just he was arguing with her, cursing her out and things like that. So she just looked back in the mirror and continued flat ironing her hair. He went to the kitchen, got the gun, brought it back to the room and put it up to her face. He said, "B, I'll kill you." She said, "Get that gun out of my face." And she turned her head. She was still flat ironing her hair. And then he was like, "Today gonna be the day. Today gonna be the day." And then he just shot her in her face. And then he ran to the door. He looked back and said, "Damn, I shouldn't have did this." And then he sped off in her car.
Incredible. Well, if you have any information out there, contact the local police department, Houston Police, or wherever you may be if you recognize or see him out there. And thank you guys for sharing your story. We want to wish you all the best.
The prosecution painted a picture of a woman trying to reclaim her peace, only to be dragged back into fear and ultimately to her death. But despite the defense's efforts to rewrite the narrative, the truth was undeniable. Level's defense attempted to present the shooting as unplanned, a moment of emotional instability, but the evidence told another story. The threats were not new. The behavior had escalated. There were warning signs all along, and Jamaica's loved ones had seen them coming. Now they sat in court, hoping for justice, and when her children took the stand, the entire room fell still. Testimony from Jamaica's children was among the most powerful. In carefully measured words, they described the night their mother died. They described the fear, the confusion, and the silence that followed. Their voices were quiet, but their truth was undeniable.
But family members of the victim tell me that he has threatened her before, but they say they never took the threat seriously because he was really part of their family and they have children.
Honestly, we really don't know. We're just hearing a lot of different rumors. I just feel like whoever knows where he is, if you see something, say something. You know, call the police, reach out to our family, just let us know something. And to whoever's hiding him, they should feel bad as well. They should feel like a coward as well, because that could have been anyone's sister, you know, mother, cousin, friend, and my family is just, we're lost.
Yeah, this guy been around our family for over 20 years, and like we did nothing but show him love.
This man had not only taken their mother, but he had broken their world. And then, after days of painful testimony, came the verdict that would finally bring a measure of peace. The sentence was clear and final. Christopher Lee Levels was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Jamaica's family, it brought a sense of accountability, though not true healing. No verdict could ever erase the pain or bring her back. Still, knowing he would never again have the opportunity to harm another woman brought a measure of peace. In the days that followed Jamaica's death, loved ones gathered, one by one, each carrying their sorrow. Though they tried to stay composed, the weight of their loss was unmistakable. They held each other tightly, grief showing in every tear and every pause between words. Stories about Jamaica filled the air. How her laughter lit up every room. How she gave everything for her children. These small, vivid memories became their anchor amid overwhelming heartbreak. But their focus quickly turned to the future. They understood that protecting Jamaica's children had to come first. Conversations began about how to move forward, how to honor her memory, and how to seek true justice beyond the courtroom. Organizing a vigil became their first act of purpose, a way to keep her name alive and remind the world that her life was more than a tragic headline. Still, her family knew their work wasn't over. If Jamaica's death was to mean anything, it had to spark change. Jamaica and the rest of the family didn't stop there. They turned their grief into action. Speaking at local rallies and events, Jamaica shared her sister's story with raw honesty. She called on others to take threats seriously, to listen when victims say they are afraid, and to stop treating domestic violence as a private issue. Jamaica's death sparked a wave of reflection far beyond her neighborhood. On social media, people began telling their own stories, stories of abuse, of survival, of loss.
Now, the family has set up a GoFundMe to help with those funeral arrangements. We'll have that information up on KHOU.com should you like to help. We'll send it back to you.
Such difficult times for that family as well tonight. Marcelino, thank you. By the way, if you or someone you know is in a bad situation at home, the National Domestic Violence Hotline may be able to help. Someone is available 24/7. That number 1-800-799-7233, or you can simply text the word START to 888-788.
Her name became part of a larger conversation about how the justice system handles domestic violence, how communities can better protect vulnerable women, and how silence can be just as dangerous as the abuse itself. Let us know what you think about this case in the comments below.